So we got this event coming up right here. This is gonna be March 21st from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. This is gonna be held at the Hovey Street Church of Christ. That's on 2338 Hovey Street. And basically what this is about is the theme of it is talking about taking back our community. So it really started when I went to prison for 18 years, and when I first went down, I was like a lot of black youth that got in the streets, lost their hope in ever making it in the NBA and all that type of stuff. And now the next people you look up to in the community is the people in the streets, the gangsters, the drug dealers, and stuff like that. So I started getting off in the streets and ended up going to boys' school. And boys' school is when I really started to develop a criminal mentality. It really was designed for you to start to become more socialized in the criminal social subculture. And that's actually when I started organizing with dudes in boys' school and stuff, and trying to create my own gang and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So, but some of those things transferred over into organizing skills and stuff. You know what I mean? And when I got out and got in the streets, and like I said, I ended up getting locked up for a bank robbery, and went to prison, got in a shootout with the police. They shot me up and stuff, and ended up getting sentenced to 39 originally, and ended up doing pretty much 18, probably like a month shy of 18 years. But when I was in prison, a lot of us go in prison thinking that you gotta be the toughest guy on the block, you know what I mean? And I was 19 coming in, so my mentality when I came in was like really seeing that the main opposition was gonna be other prisoners, you know what I mean? But the first 3 months I came down, they killed this mentally ill guy named Theodore McKenzie, and that was May 27th, 1999. And that kind of really shook me up a little bit, because I started to redefine my relationship to the system, you dig what I'm saying, and to the correctional officers. At that time, it was just like the correctional officers and sergeants. It wasn't seeing the holistic picture of the system as a social economic system. So eventually I ended up going to lock up. A friend of mine and me retaliated against a racist guard in there, and went to lockup for that, sergeant. And I got a year on lockup. And at that time, I started learning more so about that situation, about that one brother that got killed. But I also started to become politicized, because some of the older cats in there started taking a liking to me, and they wanted to educate me. So they sent me some books. A friend of mine that was that I came down with, we ended up coming in contact in prison with, he ended up teaching himself how to read and write in the county jail. He was illiterate. And one day I catch him coming out of the library, and I see a book in his hand. And I was like, wow, man, what you on? Like, you trying to get institutionalized in here or something? Because I was so anti-intellectual. You know what I mean? I didn't feel like you can understand me if you didn't walk in my shoes. You dig what I'm saying? And I think a lot of us is socially conditioned to be like this. You dig what I'm saying? Because if we are, we never going to search for bigger answers of life. So he saw where my mentality was, because he tried to give me a conscious book. And I was like, man, look, I ain't with that Black Power, Nation of Islam stuff, dude. You know what I'm saying? We got to prepare for the war when it goes down. You dig what I'm saying? That's my mentality at the time. So he gave me this hood book by Donald Goines called, I want to say, Black Gangster or something like that. It's one of those books. And I liked it because I could relate to it. And so I came back to him again. I was like, man, give me another one of them books and stuff. So he gave me Pimp by Iceberg Slim. So when I read that, that's when I realized I don't like pimps and I don't like pimping, because now I got a real understanding of what that means and how predatory and how dehumanizing pimping is. You dig what I'm saying? So at this time, I come to him again. I was like, man, let me get another one. And he tries to give me another conscious book. And, you know, I saw what he was doing. I was like, man, look, I told you the first time I'm not with all that, you know, Nation of Islam. And it's crazy that you would go to that because you always connect that to Malcolm X and education. But, you know, it goes across the board, really. You know, this before I learned about really the Black Panther Party and all the other different organizations and stuff. So long story short, he was like, if you liked all them other books that you read, if you don't like this one right here, I'll never come at you with that again. So at this time, I take the book on. It's Visions by a Black Man by Kame Shakur. And it's the difference between a male versus a man. And I'm over here reading it, and I'm like looking around, I'm seeing all these dudes around me, they might be 40, 50, 60 years old, but a lot of them is nothing but males because they only think with their genitalia. You dig what I'm saying? With this, how they've been conditioned by this society, this patriarchal, capitalist, imperialist society. So a lot of us only think about how much money we have. You dig what I'm saying? And that gives you value, or how much you can fight. You dig what I'm saying? Or how many women you can objectify and have and you can claim as under your belt. You dig what I'm saying? And I started to realize that we gonna have to start redefining ourselves, because if this is how we all looking at what manhood is about, it's very incomplete. You dig what I'm saying? Because it lacks a lot of social awareness, a lot of dedication to our community, relating to our community in a more holistic way. You do what I'm saying? So after I read that book, it was the first book that made me start to realize that you actually can learn by somebody that wrote about things that are similar, that's universal. You dig what I'm saying? Dialectical materialism talks about everything has its identity, but it also particularity, but also a universal characteristic that can encompass this. You dig what I'm saying? And we all have these universal characteristics that define our relationship to each other in this society and stuff. So at that time, I'm interested in reading, and a brother sent me this book, this Vita Wawa 2 book 11, and this was speeches by Fred Hampton. And so I'm over here reading Fred Hampton. He's 21 years old at this time. I'm 21 years old. You dig what I'm saying? I'm a rebel without a cause, though. And I don't know what that cause is yet. I just thought that cause was arbitrary authority. So you dig what I'm saying? Without really tying it to a system, you dig what I'm saying, of relations. So after I read Fred Hampton, he really kind of sparked my consciousness in a different way, where I started to realize, like, man, I want to be like this dude right here. You know what I mean? Why I ain't never heard about this dude right here? You know what I mean?
Because we understand that racism is an excuse used for capitalism. It's a byproduct of capitalism.
And the more I start to learn about he introduced me to the Black Panther Party, therefore that introduced me to Marx, Lenin, and Mao. And I started to read about those revolutions over in China and also in Russia. And started reading books like, What Is to Be Done. So I started getting an even deeper analysis of why theory and practice and vanguard leadership, and also, the dictatorship of the proletariat, these different scientific socialist questions of how to reorganize society and relate to each other differently and stuff. You dig what I'm saying? So that's pretty much how I became a revolutionary, and just was waiting to get out and put theory to practice, even though I was already doing that in prison.
So just for those who don't know, you brought up dictatorship of the proletariat. How do you define it?
I look at the dictatorship of the proletariat. Best way I explain this is, when we look at slavery, that was a dictatorship of two classes that came together in 1776. That was the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, the capitalist class, and the dictatorship of the slave-owning class. All the laws, policies, everything from sociology to psychology, all reinforced those class systems. It wasn't until like 1856 that even non-property white men had the right, to vote. You dig what I'm saying? Which shows the raw nature of the state at this time, because it really was not for the common man. You dig what I'm saying? It definitely wasn't for the slaves. It definitely wasn't for the workers. You know what I mean? So every system, every state has a class that comes together that sees their class interests within utilizing the state for their class interests. You dig what I'm saying? They're the ones that have a monopoly over the means of production. and distribution. They have the means of the social institutions and how to organize healthcare and education, and but this is all because of their class ruling dictatorship over that state. Socialist revolution is about replacing one system with another system through revolution, through takeover. You dig what I'm saying? And a lot of people want to work within the system, but you know, as Lenin pointed out, you can by working within the system, you become more like the bourgeoisie. That's like the bourgeoisie during slavery trying to convert the slave owners over to capitalism. Nah, they was promoting their own class interests. So fundamentally, every class dictatorship is always going to expand what is in their class interest. So when we come to power and replace this capitalist imperialist system, it's about the working class, the actual producers. You dig what I'm saying? Coming together and realizing collectively we have a common interest. And if we want to utilize these means of production and distribution, from agriculture to industry to education to science, research, and development, we have to utilize this on a common basis. You dig what I'm saying? That's going to think about our collective class interests. You dig what I'm saying? So the dictatorship of the proletariat is the revolutionaries, once they replace this system, becoming the new system within government, within the social spheres of like, for instance, education, science, research, development. They're the new police force, the new military, but it's a different element to the dictatorship of the proletariat, because only within this type of democracy can we start to try to fight to resolve the contradictions that came over from capitalism. You dig what I'm saying? From the differences between some people that use their minds and some that use their hands. We got to develop the ones that use only their hands, where they also use their minds. You dig what I'm saying? Because if everybody in the industries is also technocrats and engineers and stuff like that, but also manual workers, they will start to see their commonality, and they won't use their education to oppress other people within that society just because they might have a better education. No, we're going to have to provide education to all of us to bridge that gap. You dig what I'm saying? We also have to balance the economy, where the rural and the cities is not in balance. You dig what I'm saying? Where all the industry and all the funding goes to cities, whereas the countryside is neglected. You dig what I'm saying? The overcrowding that we see, that like in Chicago and stuff like that. You know, so once we in control of the state, we can have a more balanced, you dig what I'm saying, ways of relating to the economy, to relating to each other, relating to nationalities and stuff like that, as well as gender and even LGBTQ people. You dig what I'm saying? Because we are all trying to fight for our collective liberation. So this is about the left organizing a state that's going to be in their interest, but also realizing that we had to fight to resolve the contradiction of the state, because the state is a dictatorship still. And we recognize that's a contradiction. You dig what I'm saying? And in order to get to a communist society, we have to resolve those contradictions between the state and the people. You dig what I'm saying? And that's a bigger conversation to have. But, you know, that's the dictatorship of the proletariat is the only state that actually seeks its own abolishment. You dig what I'm saying? And that's hopeful, because we need to get to a society where we relate to each other as you know, human beings. You dig what I'm saying? Not as Americans, not as Iraqis, not as, you dig what I'm saying, this, that, whatever category you want to put it in yourself, but free associating human beings that see our collective species interests. You dig what I'm saying? That's the difference between the dictatorship of the proletariat and communism, is when we get to communism, we're thinking more so as species. You dig what I'm saying? But it's going to take us over time and generations having cultural revolutions within our own societies and staying on the socialist path to a communist world without nations, without classes and stuff, overcoming those contradictions. So IDOC-Watch is a prison abolitionist movement. And we have an inside-outside relationship with the prisoners in there that we formed over the years. A lot of them I know from being in there with them and stuff, you know what I mean? And we, when I was in there, we didn't have no organization that could be a voice for us. we didn't have an organization that helped advocate our issues and stuff. And I've always seen the prison and the streets as two sides of the same coin. You dig what I'm saying? You cannot address the problems with prison without addressing the problems in the streets. You can't address the problem in the streets without addressing the problems in prison, because they're interrelation. Mass incarceration gave rise to the expansion of prison. You dig what I'm saying? And then when we see with the street violence and stuff that went on, it's because they got rid of our leaders, and then they promoted the war on drugs. You dig what I'm saying? So there's an interrelationship between the two, a dialectical relationship. So with what IDOC-Watch, that's our main thing, is to support the prison population and connect that with the wider national movement against freeing all political prisoners, saying that prisons is not really the answer, because this system created the conditions to even give rise to the need for this system to feel like they need to lock away from a lot of us. You know, a lot of us are surplus labor. You dig what I'm saying? That's one thing. But it's also politically, if we can keep them incarcerated, this can go into aiding and abetting the continued recycling out of people that's being broken by their system. So we can send more people back out to the community to keep that cycle of violence going in the community, because they never got to address the issues that even got them there in the first place. So we have to see this as an interrelationship, and in order to reach some of them brothers in there, we'll send them literature. We have study groups and stuff with them and try to raise their awareness and bridge those class divisions and divisions that happens amongst the lower class often and stuff. So once they come out, they have not only attained a level of consciousness where they can see their relationships amongst their brothers and sisters in a more healthy, holistic way, they can come out to a network that can actually support them. Like, we're trying to give housing and stuff like that. We're trying to develop that, so the ones that's in our program, you can come out and you already have housing and stuff like that. So it's really trying to help ones reintegrate back in society, but not have to rely on a system that don't care about them in the first place. So in Indianapolis last month, I want to say towards the end of January, I forget the date, but they was having a hearing down at the State House about Senate Bill 449, and it was trying to pass a law where they could sentence even kids as young as 12 years old for serious violent felonies to prison and treat them just like adults. You know what I mean? And a lot of us stood up to that because we saw that as being something, another pipeline to prison. It's another attack of genocide on our community. Yeah, we at the Indiana State House. We've been down here, since 9 o'clock this morning, waiting for Senate Bill 449 to come up.
They ask you to leave if you I don't want to do that. Kwame Shakur?
Yeah, me.
Yeah.
You know, standing with families like Mike Brown and stuff, been killed by the police. You got to charge them. But you want to charge 12-year-olds and stuff. I quote Justice Cheney, that said, a black man in America has no right that the white man is bound to respect. Y'all need to amend that today and say black children and brown children have no right that the white man is bound to respect, because this really is just a reflection of y'all white supremacy. You dig what I'm saying? Okay. I've been in prison.
Wait a minute.
I've been in prison. Do I get my 1 minute?
Yeah. Not if you're going to make accusations.
Well, I'm making facts.
Okay. Well, then we're going to have to discontinue your.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Right. Because this ain't about hearing what we got to say.
Katie Blair.
Yeah.
Okay. Is Katie Blair
Well,
here?
we'll be out in the streets, boots on the ground. All right. We tired of y'all doing this to our children. We tired of y'all killing our people in the streets too. It's gonna be people like me that we're gonna start making noise out in the street. Y'all better start listening to them. They taking a gentle approach. We taking the more militant approach against your white supremacist, capitalist, imperialist system. Remember that. Power to the people. I've been a juvenile, you know what I mean? And I even know that juvenile is not really rehabilitative. But I know prison is definitely not rehabilitative. And I commend those judges that did come and speak at that event. They spoke with data and was fighting against the bill because they was explaining that all data shows that once you send kids that as young as 12 to prison and you treat them as adult, you basically lock them into a life of crime. You dig what I'm saying? And because their mind at that time is still developing, you don't start to develop those mental frontal lobe connections and stuff until we like 25 for men and stuff, you know what I mean? So a lot of young kids is gonna make mistakes at a young age, but that's like blaming mentally ill people for being mentally ill, and then you send them to prison and put them on the supermax units while you just shut down Central State and all these mental hospitals out here, but you want to convict the mental ill people for being born mentally ill. You dig what I'm saying? You have to look at not the doctor, not Frankenstein, but the doctor that gave rise to Frankenstein. So the problem is not the kids, it's the system that socially conditioned them and created conditions where they now are in a position where they feel hopelessness. When you kill off all the leaders in our community, from Martin, Malcolm X, you dig what I'm saying, to Fred Hampton, to Bunchy Carter, to all the ones that they took out, and then you flood our community with drugs. What do you expect? You know what I mean? What do you expect? So this is really a part of this mass incarceration, really. You dig what I'm saying? Which is a genocidal policy against our people. So we're not going to attack these kids for being a problem. We're going to address the system for creating the conditions that gave rise to kids that are feeling hopeless, that feels that has dysfunctional relationships in the community. Just like I said in the 60s, those social movements that came about made us reflect on a lot of things and change our ways of relating to the people in the community different. When they did think the vice lords could do something different, from that 64 to 69, if we look at that period when the government did send their repressive arm in there, they cleaned up those streets. Women and grandmothers felt safe to go down them streets. Martin Luther King lived in that neighborhood because that's where he felt the most safest at. You dig what I'm saying? So that's how we address those conditions.
Yeah, this event coming up in March, you want to tell us?
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. So we got this event coming up right here. This is going to be March 21st from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. This is going to be held at the Hovey Street Church of Christ. That's on 2338 Hovey Street. We're bringing Benny Lee here. He used to be the chief of the Vice Lords, you know, and I learned a whole lot from Benny Lee. I always saw one of the biggest solutions to solving some of the social maladies in our community is to get the people that once were part of the social problem. You dig what I'm saying? And the history of, and we also bring in Blair Anderson here. He used to be a Black Panther Party member up in the Chicago chapter. He was actually in the house when Fred Hampton was assassinated. He was shot himself. You dig what I'm saying? So he has a rich history that comes along with him. Pastor Daniel Howard, he's the pastor of the Hovey Street Church of Christ. I've been able to establish a relationship with him, coalition that we're trying to build, and basically what it's about is realizing that we have to develop a social movement, you know. To relate to what happened in the 60s with the Vice Lords. The Vice Lords started in 1958. 7 people. Ed Perry, nicknamed Pepolo or Pep, you know what I mean, started in St. Charles in 1958 with 7 individuals. By 1964, the violence that was going on in the Lawndale area, where a lot of them went in and out of prison, a lot of them seen their comrades killed, you dig what I'm saying, and a lot of them even participated in a lot of the destruction and violence in their community. 1964, that summer, you know, Bobby Gore, which was the national spokesman for the Vice Lords at the time, Cal, J-Dub, and Alfonso Alfred, which became the second chief of the Vice Lords and stuff. They all sitting down, him and Ed Perry sitting down, and a kid comes up to him and he wants to ride on a group of individuals. And they was like, what did they do to him? Well, it wasn't about what they did to us. We want to keep the Vice Lord name alive. And they started to sit back and think, and they was like, man, we don't want the same, you know, life that we have for these kids that's coming up now. And around this time, this is the key point. Around this time, from 64 to 69, is the civil rights movement is transitioning into the black liberation movement. Well, that had an effect on this social institution in the community, because now these individuals like, yeah, man, why we out here killing each other when we need to come together? We need to build black solidarity. You dig what I'm saying? And at this time, the vice lords end up eventually during this period of time forming LSD, which is Lords, Stones, and Disciples. These three organizations came together and they would start shutting down like construction sites and saying, if you're not gonna give black people jobs and stuff, then you ain't gonna be operating in our community. This also coalition that came together was when Martin Luther King spoke in Soldier Field. I want to say that was in 1968 or 67. Majority of those people that was in that audience was Lords, Stones, and Disciples. You know what I mean? When people see that picture of Martin Luther King playing pool, he was in Lawndale, which is the holy city of the Vice Lords, the founding of the Vice Lords, their main community. You dig what I'm saying? He lived on 15th and Hamlin. While the black pastors and politicians wasn't messing with Martin Luther King, the Vice Lords was. You dig what I'm saying? And at this time, they reduced the crime in their community. They reduced the violence in their community because they started to see, just like the black liberation movement, that they must have to take ownership of their community. And they must take responsibility of their community. So social movements have a reverberating effect on all social institutions. Now you got to ask yourself, where do you stand in relation to the black liberation movement? Where do you stand in relation to the Rainbow Coalition? Where do you stand in relation to what the Black Panther Party's talking about and what they doing? You know what I'm saying? So this is what we're trying to do. We trying to bring back some of these lessons from history, you know what I'm saying, and apply here in Indianapolis and establish a regional, not only just here in Indianapolis, but also with Detroit, also with Chicago, and have that ongoing relationship with them. So we can't be naive. Like, history is our biggest teacher. You dig what I'm saying? And at the end of the day, it's an unwritten rule. Black liberation will always be prohibited, if not outlawed and banned in this country. And we see that by what happened to all those organizations in the 60s. We see what happened to Fred Hampton. You know, Fred Hampton really was one of the main influences in bringing the community together and ending a lot of this violence amongst the community that they now out here talk about they want to stop with all their reformist ways of doing things. But it was Merrick Daley, you dig what I'm saying, that saw that this is the biggest threat, you dig what I'm saying, to this system. Because they're challenging social conditions, social economic conditions. They not just realizing it's about ethnic oppression of just black people. They seeing this ethnic oppression of Latinos, Native American, even lower class white, because of class oppression. You dig what I'm saying? So this was a leap in our conscience. This was a leap in our organizing and stuff. So being that we see what happened to them, we have to be more cognizant of how we operate and how we put things together. And that's why I'm forming more and more coalitions with different faith-based institutions, forming coalitions with different organizations of different that's targeting different aspects of the system, coming together, you know, of all ethnicities, also working together. And this would give us more of a shield of protection around some of these leaders that's taking the chance to come out here and to organize, because they know the repercussions. Some of them even did prison time. You know, like Bobby Gore was sent to prison for over a couple decades for a crime he did commit. It's a lot of our comrades that's still in there right now from crimes they did commit because they wanted to suppress what we was doing in the community. But the black community, the Latino community, the lower class white community has to fundamentally understand this one point. We're going to either stand together and recognize this is the way forward to solve these problems in our community. You dig what I'm saying? Or we're going to allow the state to come down and be repressive like they did to our leaders in the 60s and 70s and stuff. You dig what I'm saying? And then go back to what we see today. You know what I mean? Where we have quadruple homicides out here, where we have kids as young as 12 years old and 13 and 15 getting involved in criminal activity more and more at a young age. We got people more strung out on drugs now. You know what I'm saying? Are we going to allow those conditions to come back? Or are we going to be able to be proactive and actually do what actually history has shown us can solve the problems in our community? So this is what this coalition is about. But it is we're not naive to the fact that the state is not going to like us actually ending violence. And they not trying to shut down none of their prisons and none of their precincts. They building them to fill them. From the 60s to now, it's always been a pendulum swing from the Democrats to the Republicans, Democrats to the Republicans, and the Democrats will get different social programs, the Republicans will roll it back. You dig what I'm saying? They try to fight to get some more things in that in Roe v. Wade, in a de facto way, where you can't even get abortions nowadays and stuff, you know what I mean? And it's been a constant pendulum swing. The difference is now, though, is that when the Trump-Pence regime came to power, we end up really seeing fascism come to power. This is something fundamentally different than the regular Republicans and stuff. You dig what I'm saying? This is also like a national state of emergency in this country. I remember Martin Niemöller once said that they first came for the communists, then they came for the socialists, then they came for the labor unionists, then they went for the Jews, then they came for him. But they were silent that whole time. And right now we see them with the Latino community that they have targeted a particular demographic and put them in concentration camps. Let's call it for what it is. You dig what I'm saying? And they've also started to demonize like the Muslims and stuff with these bans on different countries and stuff like that. We see Charlottesville. You dig what I'm saying? They will never replace us. We've seen all these terrorist attacks by white supremacists, not by ISIS, not by Al-Qaeda, but white supremacists. They've been emboldened and stuff. So with that said, we seeing right now a fascist blitzkrieg against the working class on every front. You dig what I'm saying? And from history, we and this is why like we really have to understand like this 2020 election that they talking about. We can't wait to no election because we know from history fascists can be voted in, they can't be voted out. Their whole thing is to overthrow the Constitution. You dig what I'm saying? And put people in place in these federal governments. What he's doing right now, so he could become absolute Führer. You dig what I'm saying? We have to start to get in the streets. This is why building this coalition is so important right now as well, because if we do not get ahead of this consolidation of fascism, we are already living in Nazi Germany. We just not aware of it because we in the beginning preliminary stages. But we know something's different about this dude than the regular Republicans, Democrats. You know what I'm saying? It's something different. It's fascism. This is what Mussolini and Hitler stood for. But the ones that's behind him, that far right of bourgeoisie capitalists, and this one thing we have to understand too, the capitalists are not all united. You know, you got the ones that for a long time had those conservative politics, but they always allied themselves with the fascists. So they've been knowing what they've been dealing with. So let's not make no mistakes about it. They know they've been, and they just surprised that they outmaneuver them. And now they kicked a lot of them out and said, this is our party now. You dig what I'm saying? We don't care if you white supremacists. We more white supremacists than you. You dig what I'm saying? We the real white supremacists. You dig what I'm saying? We willing to commit genocide against these people. We willing to attack them head on where y'all playing with this stuff. You dig what I'm saying? So my point is this, is that this is another reason why we must, you know, if it ain't nothing about saving our species, you dig what I'm saying? At the end of the day, saving our class, you dig what I'm saying? We have to come together around this issue, and we can't do this divided. You dig what I'm saying? We have to be out here in mass numbers like Hong Kong and Puerto Rico to drive this dude out of power. So these are all interrelated. You dig what I'm saying? But this is a new development in this system where they said, nah, we done with bourgeois democracy. You dig what I'm saying? That type of dictatorship ain't gonna work no more. We want to be unilateralists. We want to be push this fascist agenda. Which, if we look around the world, and I want to make this last point, if we look at the world right now, Their system gave rise to fascism. When I was talking about these world wars and climate change and all these immigrants that's been leaving their country, and now because your system caused this contradiction in this international system, when they flood these European countries in America, even African countries, even over in Asia, and these fascist right-wing movements come ahead and they say, oh, the invaders are trying to come and take over our resources and stuff like this. Their system caused this. These people are not aliens, though. They are our people. You dig what I'm saying? And we see down in Brazil, I want to highlight Brazil one because a lot of people don't talk about that. Every 23 minutes, a person between the age of 18 and 29 that's a black male that is killed by the police. Think about that. That's exponentially higher than over here. You dig what I'm saying? This is real genocide. This can happen over in this country right now if we don't get ahead of this fascism consolidating. You dig what I'm saying? So this is a warning to us. This is a national state of emergency for the working class people and the oppressed people, nationalities in this country.
What can you see as an opportunity with Sanders, and what do you see as a problem with Sanders?
That's a good question, and that's a very, very necessary question at this point. I recently wrote about this on Facebook. I spoke about the difference between democratic socialism and scientific socialism. To get a further reading on it, because I can only give a superficial, but not the meat and bones to the fullest in this interview, but I would say this: read What Is to Be Done by Lenin. Because this is the heart of his question. You dig what I'm saying? He was basically, a lot of people don't realize that democratic socialism actually comes from the Marxist tradition when it was revolutionary. You dig what I'm saying? We actually adopted this name at one point. You dig what I'm saying? And then when we start to realize that a lot of the ones within the Marxist tradition was actually they was revising Marxism. And these are the revisionists that started to think, well, and they really did. Either they understood the dictatorship of the proletariat and wanted to betray it, or they didn't understand the dictatorship of the proletariat and thought that you could side with the bourgeoisie and change the system from within. So with Sanders, a positive note, and that's probably the only positive thing I would say about this, is that he gives a good name to socialism finally. You dig what I'm saying? We can actually talk about socialism and have this conversation, and ones won't be so thrown off now. They're like, oh, okay, so you like support Bernie Sanders? No. But I support the term socialism, but I would tell you the difference between his socialism and our socialism. One glaring difference is that with Sanders, some of the things that he talks about, and it shows his class identification with the bourgeoisie, is when he talks about these border issues. You know what I mean? He still talks about the enforcement of border. You know what I mean? Just like the fascists, just like the Democrats, just like the Republicans. This is also the same person that said that voted for Kwame Shakur to be brought back over here to be prosecuted. This is one of our socialist revolutionary heroes. You know what I'm saying? So when you go to the essence of democratic socialism, it is a capitulation to the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. We look at Europe, and for the last 10, 15 years, all the democratic socialists that came to power over there, what has fundamentally changed over in Europe? You know what I mean? And looking at that history since then, you dig what I'm saying? It shows that democratic socialism, like I said, either does not understand the dictatorship of the proletariat, because at the end of the day, you're not going to get the slaves or anybody to change slavery from within. You know, that's like the slaves saying, oh, we want to vote to be, in Congress and run for president of the Confederate States. Okay. And we want to change it to socialism or to capitalism or to any other system. Nah, this is their system. You fail to understand this is a class dictatorship, a class democracy for them. Not for the lower class people, not for the slaves. You dig what I'm saying? But it's equivalent to ones nowadays saying, okay, I'm going to try to run to be the mayor, the chief of police, and I'm going to change the system from within and be the president. Well, we saw what Barack Obama did. You know, just because you come in here and you have more liberal ideals which I would say he was very much a moderate. He was a good Machiavellian that understood double speak and speaking to many different crowds at the same time, and while selling out the lower class, but always letting the upper class realize that, nah, I didn't even mean what I just said the last paragraph. You know, and a lot of us got to be able to hear those different things. I remember, just to use an example that Barack Obama gave in the State of the Union, he was talking about mass incarceration and trying to, you know, reduce that. You know, and then 2 sentences later, he said, yeah, I'm going to invest more millions and dollars into the Burn Project. You dig what I'm saying? Burn Project, if anybody read the New Jim Crow, was the thing that was about using federal dollars to expand the mass incarceration. It doesn't even get to the root problem in itself fundamentally, and that is our class exploitation. You dig what I'm saying? This is the reason why we wake up every day and have, you know, to worry about meeting bills and barely making it paycheck to paycheck. This is the reason why we come up wake up every day and don't have enough time to really have a real relationship with our children, with our family. You dig what I'm saying? Because a lot of us is working 2 jobs now, 12-hour shifts now. You dig what I'm saying? It don't get to the heart of the thing when it comes to, like, even education. How is education being disseminated in this system? It's always going to reinforce capitalist imperialist ideals. Like, a lot of us didn't know about Fred Hampton. You know why? But we was told about Abraham Lincoln. But they only told us this mythological Abraham Lincoln. They never told us he was a white supremacist too. They never told us that he was talking about he would never allow white people to be in an inferior position to anybody else. When he was having them debates with Senator Douglas, he said if there's going to be a assignment of superiority and inferiority, it will always be assigned to the white race and not the black race. He will not allow intermarriage. He will not allow a black person to sit on the jury. You dig what I'm saying? So it don't get to the heart of white supremacy. It doesn't get to the heart of the exploitation of capitalist imperialism. It's not going to stop them from imperialist wars, from expanding their system. It's not going to stop them from the contradiction of these imperialist wars, displacing many people around the world. You dig what I'm saying? Where they have to flee their countries. You know what I mean? Due to these wars, due to them overthrowing different systems and putting in fascist dictators, it's not gonna resolve the contradiction of the climate problem. You dig what I'm saying? Which they can't change. You dig what I'm saying? Because they need more fossil fuels. They need to burn down more forests and stuff. You dig what I'm saying? So really, his solution is cosmetic surgery. So I look at it as we have to do it. You know what I mean? We have to be the ones to rise up, and we have to build coalitions. We have to build more solidarity amongst vanguard parties and different and we got to break down the sectarianism that's been keeping us divided. You know what I'm saying? And one good example we was talking about earlier, the Rainbow Coalition. You know what I mean? When Fred Hampton came together with the Young Lords, came together even with the Young Patriots, which had racist ways of looking at stuff, but they could identify with the class struggle. And by identifying with the class struggles, they could start dealing with the racist ways of thinking, because they start to realize that is impeding them from overcoming this class oppression that they are even experiencing. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, we have to have a new Rainbow Coalition, like they did back in the 60s and stuff. You know what I'm saying? And that's the way forward in order to resolve the contradiction of the system. But ultimately, we have to have a revolution. Ultimately. I guess if ones want to follow like the movement, the various movements I'm part of and stuff, you can go on Facebook, Kwame Shakur, that's Kwame Shakur, Shakur, like Tupac Shakur, Asada Shakur. This picture of Fred Hampton in the background, and me shaking Fred Hampton Jr. hand and stuff, which was a big thing for me. You know, you come from prison and you reading about his father, then you get out and finally meet him and stuff, and you see he's carrying on the legacy of his father. You know what I mean? So that was kind of like a surreal moment for me to be able to connect with some of these ones. But I guess the thing is, I want to leave everybody with, we had a historical time. And not only Indianapolis, but in the world right now. You dig what I'm saying? Indianapolis, we have an opportunity to really start to build a coalition, and get back to the basics of what we was doing in the 60s. You know what I mean? And we need to take advantage from all these individuals that's going to come here and try to help organize with us and get a hold of some of the violence in our community and get these brothers that used to be a part of the problem about the solution and start to work in a manner where we can start to really build this social movement. This is a social movement that we trying to build. This is not just like a, one-off events and stuff like that a lot of people have, and they leave think they been feeling good about themselves and get medals and plaques and stuff like this. Now our plaques gonna come when we actually successful. You dig what I'm saying? That is our plaques when we starting to change our community. But also in a bigger context, we have to look at the fact that this is a time that, like Franz Fanon, and I use this all the time, he said every generation out of relative obscurity must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. You know what I mean? Are we going to fulfill that mission, or are we going to betray it? If we betray it, what does that mean? What does that look like? You dig what I'm saying? Because it could become a lot worse than it is right now. So we feel that it's a necessity right now to start to come together and start to address these issues in a collective way, and do so not only within Indianapolis, but in the Midwest, and connect it with a larger national movement that we want to continually develop. We just need a community to support this and recognize when you see those results. It could be otherwise if you allow the state to come down on these same individuals that's taking the sacrifices and standing up for us. We are all look up to these people in history, but we are writing history right now collectively ourselves. And we got to see ourselves as part of these editors and writers of histories with our action right now.